Now we're going to talk about language skills and healthy communication, and how language skills help us come from a mindful and empowered place, being able to ask for what we need. I love the saying, when you point the finger, you have three pointed back at yourself. When we place blame on someone else, it is impossible for us to be accountable for our own behavior. So when we learn how to communicate effectively, express our emotions clearly, and avoid escalating conflict by doing those things, we avoid having to come back later and make some big amends to our loved ones. It's so helpful when we realize that by placing blame, we're stepping away from ourselves, and we're actually putting ourselves in the place of a victim, which makes us come from a place that is not a place of empowerment. When we feel like a victim, we feel like things have been done to us. So it's impossible for us to look and say, what's our part in this?
Mm-hmm. And I want to acknowledge that there are moments where, yes, someone is legitimately a victim. And 9 out of 10 times, we have a part in every situation that we're in. If we can look at that part and identify how we can make a shift so that we get to be who we want to be moving forward, the next time a situation similar to that one occurs, that's empowering. And that is the insight that we need to be able to make shifts. If we're focused on blaming and you did this and you did that, we're stuck, we're in rumination, we are paralyzed from putting ourselves in the place of being a victim and not utilizing this as an opportunity to acknowledge our part, really understand our feelings around it, and grow from it.
And I just want to say one last thing about this, because some of you may be watching this saying, well, you did do all that and it was really awful. There's a way to express your experience, which would be communicating effectively using I statements. It was really challenging for me when I experienced your blah, blah, blah. So it's using an I statement to express what was difficult, what was hard for you to hear. Mm-hmm. And once we come from that place, it's not to say we can't talk to our loved ones about our experience. That's very different than saying, you did this, and really blaming the person.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to being in the results. So when we acknowledge our own part and our own behaviors, one is, that's not saying you have to let someone else off the hook. It's not saying it excuses how they harmed you or what they did that was really challenging for you. You can't control that if they acknowledge it. You can't control if they are going to take accountability for it. And this allows you to grow and keep your side of the street clean, which is imperative for your personal growth. And so this again goes back to not being in the results of, well, what if I acknowledge it and they don't? This is for you, not for them. When we sit in resentment, we are drinking poison and waiting for someone else to be affected by it. And that doesn't help us in any way, shape, or form. And when we're hijacked by resentment, we aren't able to respond. We are in reactivity.
And unable to see our own part.
Okay, so in the spirit of what we've been talking about, breaking free from codependency, we're going to look at expressing emotions without blaming, which we did touch on in the previous slide.
So we're going to elaborate on a few things here. And in terms of breaking free from codependency, when we talk about blaming, it is about pointing the finger. And just to get a little bit deeper into how do we not blame, we have talked about identifying what we're feeling And if we can identify how we're feeling, we're likely to be able to just take enough of a moment to say, who do I want to be right now? And if we're really zeroing in on being pissed off or having a lot of emotions about what someone else did, it might feel natural for us to say, I'm so upset you did blah, blah, blah. By taking that beat, we get to just approach it differently and coming more from a place of what our needs are. So the antidote to expressing emotions without blaming actually is talking about what we need and how we experience a certain situation. And then what's the solution for us? Not what's the solution, how do we fix it, but what is the solution for us? Maybe it's a different boundary. Or maybe it's just simply giving it a language so we feel a little bit better. And within that same context, in doing that, we're going to be using I statements, because a lot of times when we blame, we're using you statements. You did this. And so when we use I statements, it's, look, my experience is blah, blah, blah. And when I feel like you're coming in 10 minutes after 10 or at 10:30, it really has me feeling like my boundaries are being pushed and I'm being taken advantage of. And I am not okay with this. So we're going to have to get back on board about cleaning things up. And I'm going to ask you, if you can't come in before 10, to not come home and to stay at a friend's. That's just a small little example of how I statements go hand in hand with not blaming.
Mm-hmm. And I think the really magical gift of using I statements is when you are speaking to someone about your experience or about how you feel, and you're not saying you did this, you didn't do that. You're just saying, I'm feeling this way. This was my experience. There's not much room for argument. Your experience of something is yours. It's your own. You're keeping the focus on yourself. And so it can pave the path for a clearer way of communication where ideally you both can hear one another. At a minimum, you're keeping your side of the street clean and you're vocalizing your experience and your needs.
And if your situation is too toxic to hold space for that, and your loved one says, no, you didn't, at that point, what we would say is you can't talk to the problem about the problem. And someone else's negativity or active drug use or whatever it is the problem. And so trying to reason things out with that person is unlikely. And at that point, you would just simply say, that's really hard for me to hear, or this just doesn't feel productive. I'm going to depart from this conversation. And that's really making the determination in real time how you take care of yourself.
And I think another thing that's really important to note is that through setting boundaries, through using I statements, keeping the focus on yourself, you may not get the results that you want or you in a perfect world would hope for, and you're just collecting information on where someone else is at. So it's all really valuable if you get information that someone's not able to communicate with you. For the example of, my experience was this, and someone responds, no, it wasn't. Okay, well, that's a lot of information for you to take in, that they're not able to have a collaborative, productive conversation. And it may be that you either need to get support around that conversation or exit that communication
Altogether. So we're going to do a little role play right now of, if we have a conflict, how we might communicate with one another. And we didn't practice this prior to doing it right now, so bear with us.
So one example that we brought up previously is when my behavior shifted when I moved home. I'd broken the contract that my mom and I had agreed upon, and she approached me saying, listen, I am needing to drug test you. So that's the premise of this and where it comes from. So why don't you let me know you're going to drug test me?
I wasn't sure that I was going to drug test you, sweetheart. It was something that just came up for me and a way for me to take care of myself.
Well, I don't understand. You don't trust me?
It's not about you. It's about what I need to do for myself. I got that monkey brain because I sensed that something was different for you. And I needed to just know for myself, yes or no. Were you using or not using?
And why don't you just believe me when I say I'm not?
I think based on our past, I have trauma in general from things that don't have to do with you. And then it was very scary going through what we went through. And I can't help but have that, that monkey brain come up, that fear around, did you relapse? I wish I could just get rid of that, but I can't. And I want to listen to that for myself now. It's important. This isn't about you. This is about me taking care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand that.
So that's like in our situation, what that might look like, where I am making it about me, where I'm saying, this isn't about you. This is what I need to do for myself. There's not much to come back with.
I think we can also do the alternative and show you guys how you could respond if someone invalidates how you're feeling or is just not able to have a conversation.
Okay.
So let's do that version.
Okay.
So why did you drug test me?
I drug tested you because I had a lot of fear and chatter in my head about if you had relapsed or not.
So you don't trust me?
I still have that trauma response of, oh my God, what's going on? Because you were acting differently. And so no, I don't know what to think when that happens.
I wasn't acting differently.
I hear that you don't think you were acting differently. All I know is that my experience was different.
Your experience is wrong.
That's so hard for me to hear because I'm in my body. I know what my experience is. I can't control that you think it was wrong. I can't put a right or a wrong on my feelings.
Okay.
So that's like where, and sometimes when we're on the spot and we're tongue-tied, it's really hard to come up with that language. And we've been practicing this for so many years, but if you feel like it's hard for you to come up with the language that you want to use and you feel paralyzed in the conversation, that's okay. You still get to take care of yourself and say, I'm really struggling with this conversation. I need to just stop while I can get my head together around it.
Always give yourself the grace to step away, regroup, and come back if you need to.
And if it's too hard for you to verbally come back, that's okay too. You can write something down.
Write a letter, reach out, get support from a therapist, in inviting your loved one into a therapy session. There are tons of options if it feels too overwhelming to navigate that, dependent on how volatile someone else is, if you feel stuck and scrambled in your emotions, if you don't want to get hijacked.
Yeah, or if your loved one is actively using. So now to bring in another layer for I statements, it's acknowledge what you're hearing. When we feel like we're being heard, it's so medicinal in terms of it amps things down. So when we're in a heated conversation with someone And we can say, I'm hearing what you're saying, or I hear that you think my feelings around drug testing you are wrong, or around feeling like I think that you relapsed is wrong. That's really hard for me to hear. So acknowledging what you're hearing sometimes is almost like reiterating what you're hearing the person saying without having it feel fluent for you, like it's not too therapized. For me, like now, it just rolls off my tongue. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that the home contract feels like a lot. I want you to know that I love you. This is really for me, and so that we can have the best experience possible. Let me know if there's anything on that pertains to me that you want to see. And so when we start to get fluent in it, it's almost like we approach our loved ones with a little bit of respect, even in the hardest situations. And when we come forth in that way where we're acknowledging what we hear, then, and the other thing is, if any of you have heard of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, it's a evidence-based languaging. It's a little different in DBT. It's I feel when you. We've shifted it just ever so slightly to acknowledge what we're hearing, to take the you piece out. Sometimes when we're in really challenging relationships, if you're not really, really, really fluent at the DBT language and the training, the you piece can be emphasized and come across like blaming. Mm-hmm. So we just wanted to put that out there.
Definitely. And I love how you said it's medicinal to acknowledge feelings, because it so is. I use this in my marriage and in my friendships. Even if I completely disagree with someone, or I feel as though they've wronged me, to really be able to reflect back what I hear them saying, what I hear them expressing their feeling, is such an important piece in the equation of having effective communication. And it really diffuses tension or resentment or any challenging emotions related to the conversation you're having. Additionally, avoiding accusatory language. So we discussed the value and importance in not pointing the finger and not blaming, because that doesn't help anyone in a moment of communication. Another tool to add in there that is so normal and so common to use is removing the word but out of your vocabulary. We like to replace but with the word and. So I'm hearing that you're feeling sad and this hurt my feelings. Something like that. When we say but, I'm hearing that you're feeling sad, but this hurt my feelings. It can negate how the other person's feeling, even if that's not your intention in the slightest. It removes the value of what came before the but. And then we have staying calm and present in conflict. So this is where we really need to exercise the muscle. It's easier said than done, where just stay calm and be present in the discomfort of conflict. You are working the muscle out every time you're able to take a breath, remove yourself, step away if you need to in a challenging conversation, be able to reflect, come back. If you're able to be in the conversation that feels difficult, stay calm, take pauses, and not get hijacked by your anger, by your anxiety, by your disappointment, and speak from your heart of how you're feeling, utilizing those I statements, acknowledging feelings, and setting any boundaries that need to be set. You're going to get stronger each time you engage in this. And just as my mom said, at this point, this language just flows off her tongue. And that can be the same way for you. It's just working out that muscle to build strength and create habit, and have it be your immediate response versus this massive effort.
And one other thing to add in, when we speak from the heart and we say things like, this is really challenging for me, please bear with me, or I'm going to find my way through telling you this, or I may need to just take a pause right now. I'm having a lot of feelings and I need to get organized around them. When we speak from the heart and we give it a language, it's so honest, and it helps us to stay grounded, because we're not, having this simmering anxiety that we're not speaking to. Instead, we're being authentic and we're speaking to it, and it's real. And that helps us to detach with love from someone else's behavior.
Mm-hmm. And it can also take the power away from that anxiety or from that fear, because you've given it a name and you've put it out there. You're not trying to hide it or overcompensate. You're just leveling with humility of, hey, this is really hard for me right now. And that in itself is highly empowering.
And it's a contrary action. So it's all coming like...
It's a win-win.
Yeah.